The fortress rose from the mountain like a scar against the twilight sky, all blackened stone and iron spikes that seemed designed to warn rather than welcome. Sira clutched her threadbare cloak tighter as the wind howled through the courtyard, carrying with it the scent of pine and something darker, something that made her pulse quicken with an instinct she couldn't name. She had nowhere else to go. The village had made that clear when they'd burned her mother's cottage 3 days after the burial, claiming the fever that took her was touched by moon madness. Sira had watched the flames from the forest edge, her few possessions tied in a bundle at her feet, understanding that she was no longer one of them. Perhaps she never had been. The Blackthorn fortress needed servants. That was what the riders had announced in the village square 2 weeks prior, their armor bearing the sigil of House Vorkai, a wolf's head crowned in thorns. No one had volunteered. The stories were too numerous, too dark. But Sira had listened from the shadows, memorizing the date and the road. Name? The steward was a thin woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that assessed Sira with clinical detachment. Sira. Just Sira. No family name? No family. Something flickered in the steward's expression, not quite pity, but acknowledgement. She marked something in her ledger. You understand what you're agreeing to. The king's household is not like others. There are rules. Strict ones. Sira nodded, though she understood nothing beyond her desperation. Never enter the east wing after sundown. Never go to the lower chambers without escort. Never, under any circumstances, approach the king directly unless summoned. The steward's voice dropped. And on full moon nights, you stay in your quarters with the door barred. No matter what you hear. What will I hear? The steward's pen paused. Screaming, chains, the sound of something that should not exist trying to become something even worse. She looked up, her gaze sharp. Can you follow these rules? Sira thought of the burned cottage, the suspicious stairs, the unmarked grave in the forest where her mother rested. Yes. Then you start tonight. 3rd floor. Servants' wing. You'll work the kitchens and the great hall. Keep your eyes down, your hands busy, and your curiosity silent. The steward handed her a ring of keys. Your wages will be kept in account. You may leave when you've earned enough for passage elsewhere. Most do eventually. And if I don't? The steward's smile was thin and humorless. Then you'll learn why we always need more servants. The fortress interior was a labyrinth of stone corridors and spiral staircases, lit by torches that seemed to burn with an unnatural steadiness. Sira's small room was bare but clean: a cot, a chest, a narrow window that overlooked the northern mountains. She unpacked her few belongings and tried not to think about the sounds the steward had described. When she descended to the kitchens that evening, the other servants barely acknowledged her. They moved with practiced efficiency, their conversations dying whenever she drew near. She learned her tasks in silence, scrubbing pots, carrying water, setting tables in the great hall for meals that would be eaten by men she was instructed never to look at directly. It was near midnight when she first heard it, a sound like thunder, but beneath her feet rather than above. The stone floor trembled. In the kitchens, the other servants froze, their faces draining of color. Then came the howl, something between animal rage and human agony, a sound that seemed to originate from the very bones of the mountain. East wing, someone whispered. The king. Sira's hands shook as she set down the pot she'd been scrubbing. The howl came again, longer this time, and beneath it she heard the rattle of chains and the scrape of claws against stone. What's wrong with him? She asked, though she already knew no one would answer. An older cook, her face creased with years of service, finally met her eyes. The curse. It's been 3 generations now. The king bears it worst of all, Lycan blood that won't settle, won't submit. On certain nights, he's more beast than man. And on the full moon, she trailed off, making a warning gesture. Best you learn to sleep through it, girl, or you won't last a week. But Sira didn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed and listened to the sounds of suffering that echoed through the fortress walls, and wondered what kind of king screamed like a creature being torn apart from the inside. 3 weeks passed before Sira saw him. She had learned the rhythms of the fortress by then, when to avoid certain corridors, which servants could be trusted with questions, how to make herself invisible in the great hall during meals. The king's household was smaller than she'd expected, mostly warriors and advisors who spoke in low voices about pack politics and border disputes. They ate in silence, their eyes constantly moving, assessing threats that Sira couldn't see. The king himself never appeared at meals. His food was delivered to his chambers by the steward alone. carried on silver trays that returned untouched more often than not. He doesn't eat, Sira observed one morning, scrubbing blood from the flagstones near the east wing entrance. The stains were fresh, and she tried not to think about their source. The guard stationed nearby, a young man named Torvin with kind eyes and a scarred jaw, glanced at her with something like sympathy. He eats. Just not food, not in the way you mean. Then what? Vengeance, rage, his own guilt. Torvin shifted his weight, his hand resting on the sword at his hip. The curse isn't just physical, you understand. It's in his mind, his soul. Every transformation tears at him, and he remembers all of it. Sira sat back on her heels, her scrub brush dripping pink water. How long has he been cursed? Since his 20th year. A witch's vengeance for his grandfather's crimes, or so the story goes. Every male heir of House Vorakai since then has carried Lycan blood, but it manifests differently in each generation. In the king's father, it was manageable, controlled, but in him, Torvin shook his head. The beast is stronger, more violent. There are nights when even the silver chains barely hold. Why doesn't he seek a cure? He has. Healers, mages, witch hunters, they've all tried. Some died in the attempt, others fled. The curse is bound to his bloodline, woven too deep to extract without killing him. Torvin's expression darkened, and the pack councils see weakness. Rival alphas circle like wolves around wounded prey, waiting for the right moment to challenge his rule. A howl erupted from deep within the east wing, cutting off further conversation. It was daylight, not even close to the full moon, but the sound was unmistakably inhuman. Sira's hands clenched around her brush as she felt something shift in her chest, a pulling sensation that made no sense. Torvin noticed her reaction. You feel it? Feel what? That pull. Like something calling to you. His eyes narrowed. You should tell the steward. There are old stories about servants who hear the beast's call. It never ends well for them. But Sira said nothing. She finished her work and retreated to the kitchens, trying to ignore the way her heart had begun to race at that sound, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous, recognition. That night, she broke her first rule. The east wing was forbidden after sunset, but Sira found herself climbing the stairs anyway, drawn by an impulse she couldn't explain. The corridors here were different, colder, darker, with walls scarred by claw marks and floors stained with old blood. Torches burned low, creating shadows that seemed to move with predatory intent. She heard him before she saw him, heavy breathing, chains rattling, a low growl that vibrated through the stone. Sira approached a massive iron door reinforced with silver bands, her pulse thundering in her ears. Through the barred window, she could see a chamber lit by a single brazier, and in the center, a figure. He was chained to the wall by silver manacles. His body half-transformed human form struggling against lichen features that pushed at his skin like something trying to break free. Massive shoulders, clawed hands, eyes that flickered between ice blue and molten gold. His dark hair fell across a face that might have been handsome if not for the anguish etched into every line. He was magnificent. And he was in agony. Sira's hand reached for the door before she could stop herself. Don't. The voice was rough, barely human. His head snapped up, and those shifting eyes locked onto her through the bars. Leave, now. She should have obeyed. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed at her to run. But instead, she stayed frozen, meeting his gaze. You're hurting, she whispered. A sound between a laugh and a snarl escaped him. I'm always hurting. And you're breaking every rule that keeps stupid little servants alive in this cursed place. His muscles tensed, chains pulling taut. Go, before I lose what little control I have left. But Sira didn't move. She couldn't explain it, but standing here being seen by him felt like the first real thing that had happened to her in months. What can I do? Nothing. There's nothing anyone can do. His voice dropped to something almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. I'm beyond saving, girl. And you're too innocent to be standing here playing witness to a monster's imprisonment. You're not a monster. His laugh was bitter. You don't know what you're talking about. I know what monsters look like. I've seen them in human skin, wearing pleasant faces while they burn the homes of the grieving. Sira's hands gripped the bars. Whatever you are, you're not that. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then his expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through the rage. What's your name? Sira. Sira, he repeated, as if testing the weight of it. I'm Kale, and you need to leave my sight before I do something we'll both regret. She should have listened. But as she finally turned away, she felt his eyes on her back, burning like brands. And she knew with a certainty that terrified her that this wouldn't be the last time she broke the rules for him. The nightmares started after that first encounter. Sierra would wake gasping, her sheets soaked with sweat, fragments of dreams clinging to her consciousness, chains breaking, silver burning, a howl that shook the foundations of the world. And always, those eyes, ice blue and molten gold, watching her with an intensity that felt like being unmade and remade simultaneously. She tried to focus on her work, to lose herself in the mindless routine of kitchen duties. But her awareness had shifted. Now she heard every sound from the east wing, felt every tremor through the stone when the beast struggled against its bonds. The other servants noticed her distraction, but said nothing, too wrapped in their own survival to question hers. It was the steward who finally confronted her. You went to the east wing. It wasn't a question. The older woman stood in the doorway of Sierra's small room, her expression unreadable. Torvin reported seeing you on the stairs 3 nights ago. Sierra's hands stilled on the shirt she'd been mending. I did. And nothing. I looked. I left. The steward studied her for a long moment. The king has asked for you. The needle slipped, pricking Sierra's finger. Blood welled, bright and red. What? Tomorrow evening. You're to attend him in his chambers, the sitting room, not the containment cell. The formal ones. The steward's mouth thinned. I advised against it. You're too new, too naive about what he is. But he was, insistent. Why does he want to see me? I imagine he'll tell you himself. The steward turned to leave, then paused. Sierra, the king is not a fairy tale. He's not some cursed prince waiting for true love's redemption. He's a man fighting a losing battle against his own nature, and everyone close to him eventually becomes collateral damage. Remember that. But the warning only made Sierra's pulse quicken with anticipation rather than fear. The next evening, she was escorted to a part of the fortress she'd never seen, the upper chambers where the king conducted his official business. The rooms here were surprisingly refined, with tapestries depicting ancient Lycan kings and libraries filled with leather-bound volumes. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting dancing shadows across furniture that looked both comfortable and utterly unused. Kale stood at the window, his back to her. In human form and formal clothing, he looked different than she'd expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, yes, but there was a deliberate stillness to him, a controlled precision in every movement. His dark hair was tied back, revealing the strong lines of his jaw and the faint scars that marked his neck, evidence of silver burns. You came, he said without turning. You summoned me, I requested. There's a difference. He finally looked at her, and Sierra's breath caught. In the firelight, his eyes were purely blue, though shadows of gold flickered in their depths. You could have refused. Could I? A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. No, probably not. He gestured to a chair near the fire. Sit, please, Sierra obeyed, hyper-aware of the space between them, the way he kept careful distance, as if proximity itself might be dangerous. Why did you want to see me? Because you're either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish, and I need to determine which. Kale moved to pour wine from a crystal decanter, his movements practiced and elegant. You shouldn't have come to my cell that night. I know, and yet you did. He offered her a glass, which she accepted with trembling fingers. Why? Sierra considered lying, offering some excuse about curiosity or confusion. But his gaze demanded honesty. I don't know. I heard you. And I needed to see. Needed, he repeated, tasting the word. That's interesting. He took a drink, his eyes never leaving her face. Do you know what happens when a Lycan recognizes certain scents? Certain resonances? Her pulse jumped. No, they become territorial, obsessive. His voice dropped. Dangerous. Are you dangerous to me? Kale's laugh was sharp. I'm dangerous to everyone, Sierra, but to you. He set down his glass with careful precision. Yes, especially to you. She should have been frightened. Instead, she felt that strange pulling sensation again, as if invisible threads connected them. I don't understand. Neither do I. That's the problem. He began to pace, restless energy contained in controlled movement. 3 nights ago, you stood outside my cell. And for the first time in a decade, the beast quieted. Not completely, never completely, but enough that I could think, could breathe. He stopped, turning to face her fully. You shouldn't have that effect on me. What effect? Calm, focus, like you're an anchor when everything else is chaos. His hands clenched at his sides. It's impossible. And it terrifies me. Sira set down her own glass, standing slowly. Because you think you'll hurt me. Because I know I will, eventually. It's what I do, I destroy everything I touch. My father learned that. My advisors. Anyone fool enough to get close. His expression turned bleak. The curse doesn't just transform my body. It twists my mind, makes me volatile, violent. And on the full moon, he trailed off, jaw tight. Show me, Sira said quietly. What? Your hand. Show me. Kale stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. But slowly, he extended his right hand. Even in human form, his fingers were longer than they should be, with thick calluses and faint scars. Sira took it in both of hers, ignoring his sharp intake of breath. His skin was warm, almost feverish. She could feel the tension vibrating through him, coiled muscle and restrained power. But beneath that, something else, a pulse that matched her own. A rhythm that felt impossibly familiar. You're not hurting me, she whispered. Not yet. But his fingers curled slightly around hers, as if he couldn't help himself. Sira, you need to understand what you're doing. What this could become. What is this? His eyes met hers, and the gold flickered stronger. Something that could save me. Or destroy us both. The fire crackled. Outside, wind howled through the mountains. And Sira realized she was still holding his hand, neither of them willing to break contact. I'm not afraid of you, she said. Then you're a fool. But there was no heat in the words, only resignation. And beneath that, the faintest trace of hope. The fortress changed as the full moon drew near. Sira felt it in the air, a building pressure that made her skin prickle and her heart race without cause. The guards grew tense, speaking in clipped voices and checking their weapons with obsessive frequency. The other servants moved faster, their eyes darting to shadows as if expecting attack from unseen threats, and Kale withdrew. She hadn't seen him since that evening in his chambers, though she felt his absence like a physical ache. The steward delivered her instructions with pursed lips and knowing eyes. The king has confined himself to the east wing. He will not take visitors. He will not take meals. And when the moon rises full tomorrow night, the entire fortress will lock down. You are to remain in your quarters. Understood? Sira nodded, though her chest tightened with anxiety. She couldn't name. That afternoon, she was polishing silver in the great hall when raised voices echoed from the council chamber. The doors were thick, but sound carried through the stone, and she caught fragments of heated argument. Cannot continue this way, my king. The pack councils grow restless, let them. Kale's voice, rough with barely controlled rage. I will not bow to their demands for a political mating. Then they will see it as weakness. Challenge your right to rule. A different voice, older and heavy with authority. The curse makes you vulnerable. An heir would secure your position, an heir would inherit this curse. The words were bitten off, final. I will not pass this suffering to another generation. Then the bloodline ends with you. And House Vorakai falls to whichever alpha can prove himself strongest in combat. Silence. Then Kale again, quieter, but no less intense. I have made my decision. This discussion is over. Footsteps approached the doors. Sira quickly gathered her supplies and fled to the kitchens, her mind churning with implications. Political mating, heirs, the curse continuing through bloodlines. It painted a picture of a king trapped, not just by magic, but by duty and impossible choices. That evening, Torvin found her scrubbing pots by the kitchen fire. You should eat something, he said, setting a bowl of stew beside her. Tomorrow will be difficult. The full moon, he nodded grimly. The worst night of the month. The king fully transforms, and the beast is uncontrollable. It takes 6 guards with silver-tipped spears just to keep him contained. And even then, he shuddered. Last month, he nearly broke through, tore 3 men apart before the chains held, Sira's hands stilled in the washwater. He remembers it after, every moment, every injury he inflicts, every scream. It's its own kind of torture. Torvin's expression softened with genuine sympathy. He's a good king, you know. Fair, strategic, protective of his people. But the curse is eating him alive from the inside out. One day, it will win. And when it does, what? The pack councils will put him down like a rabid dog. And the fortress will fall to whichever alpha claims dominance. He met her eyes. That's why they push for a political mating. Why, they bring noble females to court, hoping one will secure the bloodline before it's too late. But the king refuses them all. Why? Torvin smiled sadly. Because he still has hope. Somewhere deep down, He believes he might find a way to break the curse. Or at least, a way to end it without taking the entire kingdom down with him. That night, Sira lay awake in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of preparation echoing through the fortress. Iron being hammered, chains being tested, the low chanting of the fortress priests who would attempt futilely. From what she'd heard to contain the curse with holy wards, and beneath it all, a howl building like a storm on the horizon, she rose before dawn, unable to sleep. The corridors were empty as she made her way to the kitchens, but she felt watched, assessed, as if the fortress itself was aware of her restlessness. In the great hall, she found evidence of last night's council meeting: overturned chairs, scattered papers, the lingering scent of anger and fear. She was gathering the documents when one caught her eye, a letter, written in elegant script. Lord Kale of House Vorakai, the Northern Pact Council hereby issues formal challenge to your continued rule. Present a viable heir within the full moons, or submit to trial by combat for the right of alpha dominance. Your curse is a stain upon the bloodline and a weakness that threatens all Lycan territories. You have until the winter solstice to comply, Lord Rathker. First, Alpha of the North. Sarah's hands trembled as she read it twice, 3 times. Trial by combat. Winter solstice. The timeline was brutally short, and the implication was clear. They expected Kale to fail. They wanted him to fail. You weren't supposed to see that, she spun. Kale stood in the doorway, but this version was different from the composed king she'd spoken with before. His eyes were already shifting color, his breathing labored. Transformation had begun. I'm sorry, I know. He moved into the room with careful deliberation, as if each step required conscious thought. You clean up everyone's messes. It's what you do. This isn't just a mess. No, it's a death sentence dressed in political necessity. He reached for the letter, and Sira saw his hand was shaking. They'll have their combat, and they'll have their answer. You could give them an heir. His laugh was bitter. With whom? Every female they've paraded before me is looking for power, status, a path to queenship. None of them would survive being mated to this. He gestured to himself, and Sira saw the claws beginning to emerge from his fingertips. I won't condemn someone to that fate. What if she stopped, uncertain? What if what? What if there was someone who wasn't looking for power? Someone who didn't care about status or queenship? Kale's eyes locked onto hers, and the gold burned bright. Sira, don't. I'm just saying I know what you're saying. He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from him, the barely contained violence of a body at war with itself. And the answer is no. You don't understand what a mate bond with a cursed Lycan would mean. The pain, the danger, the inevitable moment when I lose control. And then what? Kill me? Sira lifted her chin. You've had dozens of chances. You could have done it that first night in your cell, or in your chambers. But you didn't, because I was in control then. Tomorrow night, I won't be. His voice dropped to something barely human. The beast doesn't distinguish between friend and foe. It only knows hunger and rage. And if you were bound to me, if you carried my mark, it would see you as prey and mate simultaneously. Do you understand how dangerous that is? She did. But she also understood that he was dying by inches, trapped between a curse and impossible choices. And for reasons she couldn't explain, walking away felt more dangerous than staying. Tomorrow night, she said carefully, I'll be in my quarters. Barred door, safe, good. But he looked at her as if memorizing every detail, as if this might be the last time he saw her whole and unharmed. Kale? Yes. After the moon passes. Will you see me again? He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, if I survive it, if there's anything left of me worth seeing, there will be. His expression was anguished. You have too much faith in monsters, little one. But as he turned to leave, she saw his hand reach out, fingers brushing the doorframe where she stood, close enough to touch but maintaining that crucial distance. As if he wanted to reach for her but didn't dare. The fortress fell silent as the sun set. Sira sat in her small room, the door barred as instructed, and listened to the transformation begin. It started with a hollow and mournful, barely recognizable as coming from anything that had once been human. Then came the sounds of struggle, chains rattling, silver burning flesh, the crack of bones reshaping, and through it all, screaming. The other servants had warned her it would be bad, but nothing prepared her for the reality. Kale's voice, what remained of it, carried through the stone walls, raw with agony. She heard guards shouting orders, the clatter of weapons, the priests chanting their useless words. Then the beast truly emerged. The roar shook the foundations. Syrah pressed her hands over her ears, but it did nothing to block out the sound of pure, primal rage. Something massive hit the walls of the containment cell hard enough to crack stone. The chains screamed under impossible strain. Hold the silver line. A guard's voice, barely audible over the chaos. Don't let him reach the doors. More impacts. The sound of claws gouging deep furrows in iron. And beneath it all, that constant, anguished howl, a sound that spoke of suffering beyond endurance. Syrah's hands were shaking. Her heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. Every instinct screamed at her to stay put, to trust the locked door and the distance between her quarters and the east wing. But that pull was there again. Stronger now, insistent. She stood before she'd consciously decided to move. Her hands found the bar across her door and lifted it. The corridor beyond was empty, all servants and non-essential personnel locked in their rooms as ordered. She shouldn't do this. She knew she shouldn't, but her feet carried her toward the east wing anyway, drawn by something deeper than logic or self-preservation. The scene in the corridor outside the containment cell was chaos. 6 guards in silver-reinforced armor formed a semicircle around the massive iron door, spears leveled, their faces pale with fear and determination. The steward stood to one side, her expression grim, as she supervised the holding pattern. Inside the cell, the beast raged. Syrah caught a glimpse through the barred window, something massive and terrible. More wolf than man, with eyes that burned pure molten gold. Its fur was black as midnight, muscles rippling under skin that seemed barely able to contain the power beneath. Silver chains crisscrossed its body, burning where they touched, but still it fought, and it was magnificent. What are you doing here? The steward grabbed Syrah's arm, pulling her back. You were ordered to stay in your quarters. I know, Syrah couldn't finish the sentence because she didn't have an answer. The beast's head snapped up. Its eyes, Kale's eyes, buried somewhere in that monstrous form, locked onto her through the bars. Everything stopped. The guards tensed, expecting attack. The steward pulled harder at Syrah's arm, but the beast didn't lunge. Instead, it went utterly still, its massive chest heaving with labored breaths. Then it whined. The sound was heartbreaking, a confused, plaintive noise that didn't match the monster making it. The beast's ears flattened, its head lowering in something almost like submission. Impossible, the steward breathed. One of the guards, Torvin, lowered his spear slightly. It doesn't respond to anyone, ever. The beast took a step forward, chains pulling taut, but there was no aggression in the movement. It was almost tentative, as if approaching something precious and fragile. Syrah pulled free from the steward's grip and moved closer to the door. Don't. Multiple voices shouted the warning, but she placed her hand against the iron bars, and the beast pressed its massive head against them from the other side. Its breathing slowed. The wild, manic light in its eyes dimmed to something almost sane. Syrah, the steward said quietly. Step back, slowly. It's not going to hurt me. You can't possibly know that, but she could. Deep in her bones, in the space where that inexplicable pull originated, she knew. This creature, cursed, transformed, barely rational, recognized her. And in recognizing her, it found some measure of peace. The beast made another sound, this one almost questioning. Its eyes searched her face as if trying to remember something just out of reach. I'm here, Syrah whispered, not caring that it made no sense. I'm not leaving. For the rest of the night, she stood there. The guards remained at ready, but their spears gradually lowered as they watched the impossible. A beast that had nearly killed men hours before, now lying quiet. Its attention fixed on a servant girl with no name and no power. The transformation back began near dawn. Syrah watched through the bars as the massive form began to shrink, fur receding, bones cracking back into human alignment. The beast fought it, clearly wanting to maintain the connection with her. But the magic was stronger. When it was done, Kale lay on the stone floor, naked and bloodied, the silver chains loose around his human form. His eyes, pure blue again, found hers with an expression of wonder and terror. You came, he rasped. I had to. You could have died. But I didn't. Syrah pressed her forehead against the bars. You calmed when you saw me. I know. His voice was hoarse, exhausted. I shouldn't have. The beast doesn't calm. It doesn't recognize anyone. But it knew you. How is that possible? The steward cleared her throat. Because she's your mate, my king. The silence that followed was absolute. Kale pushed himself upright with visible effort, his gaze never leaving Syrah's face. That's not. That can't be. The signs are clear. The calming effect. The recognition, even in full transformation. The pull between you. The steward's voice was matter of fact, but Sierra heard the undercurrent of concern. The mate bond has recognized her. No, Kale's denial was immediate and vehement. I don't have a mate. The curse prevents it every seer. Every prophecy has said the same. A cursed king cannot bond, and yet, the steward gestured to where they stood. Separated by iron, but connected by something far stronger. Sierra's mind reeled. Mate, the word carried weight in Lycan culture. She knew that much from overheard conversations. It meant more than marriage, more than love. It meant souls bound, lives intertwined, a connection that couldn't be broken without destroying both parties. This changes nothing, Kale said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sierra is a servant. She has no status. No, she's your mate, the steward interrupted. Status is irrelevant. The bond doesn't care about politics or bloodlines. Then the bond is cruel. Kale stood, pulling a sheet around himself with shaking hands. Because I won't bind her to this curse. I won't condemn her to watching me transform, to living in fear of the night. I finally lose control completely. He looked at Sierra, his expression breaking her heart. I won't make you that sacrifice. What if it's not a sacrifice? Sierra's voice was stronger than she felt. What if it's a choice? You don't know what you're choosing. Then tell me. Explain what being your mate would mean. Kale closed his eyes. Pain, danger, watching me suffer every moon cycle. Living with the knowledge that one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 10 years, the beast will win. And when it does, you'll either die with me or spend the rest of your life grieving what we could have been. He opened his eyes, and they were wet. That's what you'd be choosing. And if I choose it anyway, then you're a fool. But his hands gripped the bars from his side, mirroring hers. And I'm an even bigger fool for wanting to let you. The sun broke over the mountains, streaming through the high windows. The longest night was over. They had both survived, but Sierra understood that the real danger was just beginning. News of the mate bond spread through the fortress like wildfire. By midday, every servant, guard, and advisor knew that the king's beast had calmed for a nameless orphan girl. The reactions ranged from shock to skepticism to outright hostility. Sierra felt the weight of stares as she tried to return to her normal duties. Heard the whispered conversations that died when she approached. The political implications arrived in the form of Lord Rathger himself. He came with an entourage of northern alphas. Their wolves barely contained beneath human skin, their eyes assessing everything with predatory calculation. Sierra watched from the kitchens as they strode into the great hall, demanding audience with the king. This should be interesting, Torvin muttered, stationed near the kitchen entrance. Rathger's been pushing for Kale's abdication for years. The mate bond throws all his plans into chaos. Why? Sierra kept her voice low, conscious of the other servants listening. Because a mated king is stronger, more stable. The bond provides grounding, focus, everything Kale's been lacking. Torvin's expression was conflicted. It's also proof that the curse can be managed. That he's not the lost cause they've been painting him as. But I'm nobody. No bloodline, no pack affiliation, which makes it even better. It proves the bond chose for compatibility, not politics. That's rarer than you'd think in Lycan culture. He glanced at her with something like admiration. You've accidentally become the most important person in the kingdom, Sierra. I hope you're ready for what that means. She wasn't. Not even close. The meeting in the great hall grew heated. Sierra couldn't see what was happening, but she heard raised voices, the crash of furniture, the low warning growls that spoke of dominance, challenges barely restrained. Then Kale's voice, cutting through the chaos. I will not present her to your judgment. The bond is recognized. That's all that matters. The bond with a servant? Rathger's reply was sharp with disdain. A girl with no name, no lineage, no training in pack politics? You insult us by suggesting she could be queen. I'm suggesting nothing. The bond chose. I didn't. Then reject it. The bond is young, barely formed. Break it now, before it fully sets, and take a proper mate. One with bloodlines that could strengthen your claim. Heal your weakness, heal? Kale's laugh was harsh. You think a political mating would heal anything? You just want control over who sits beside me on the throne. We want stability. A king who can rule without transforming into a beast every moon cycle. A king who can produce heirs without passing on a curse. Rathger's voice dropped to something dangerous. Give us that, or step aside for an alpha who can. Silence. Then footsteps approaching the kitchen corridor. Sierra barely had time to step back before Cale appeared in the doorway. He looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed and his jaw tight with barely controlled fury. But when he saw her, some of the tension eased. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Somewhere private." She followed him to his chambers, the formal ones, not the containment cell, and waited as he paced before the fire like a caged wolf. "They want you examined," he finally said. "The pack elders. They'll send a seer to verify the bond, to assess your suitability." Suitability for what? For being queen, for bearing heirs, for surviving the political nightmare this has become. He stopped pacing, turning to face her. "I can refuse them. Tell them the bond is my business alone. But that will give Rathgar more ammunition for his challenge, more proof that I'm unfit to rule." Sierra's throat was dry. "And if I agree to the examination, then they'll pick you apart, question your bloodline, your character, your strength. They'll look for any excuse to declare the bond invalid, to push for me to reject you in favor of their political choice." His hands clenched. "And if they can't find a reason to reject you, they'll simply try to break you instead. Make you flee, make you doubt, make you wish you'd never heard of House Vorakai. Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know what you're walking into." Cale moved closer, his expression raw with emotion. "I meant what I said before, Sierra. I won't force this on you. If you want to leave, if you want to go back to being invisible in the kitchens, I'll protect that choice. I'll tell them the bond was a mistake, that it failed to set properly. You'll be safe. And you? I'll deal with Rathgar's challenge. Either I'll win and buy myself more time, or I'll lose and the curse becomes someone else's problem." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Either way, you'll be free." Sierra looked at him, truly looked. At the scars on his neck from silver burns, the exhaustion etched into every line of his face, the way he held himself as if expecting rejection at any moment. This was a man who had been fighting alone for so long he'd forgotten what it meant to have someone stand beside him. "I don't want to be free," she said quietly. His eyes snapped to hers. "Sierra, I want to be examined. I want to face their seers and their questions." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of him. "Not because I care about being queen, or politics, or bloodlines, but because I'm tired of being invisible. And because when I stood outside your cell last night, I felt more real, more alive, than I have in my entire life. You'll be hurt. They'll tear you apart trying to find your weaknesses. Then they'll find them. But they'll also find that I'm still standing afterward." She lifted her chin. "I'm stronger than I look, Cale. I've survived things that should have broken me. I can survive this too." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then slowly, he reached out and cupped her face with one large hand. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if she were something precious. "If we do this," he said softly, "there's no going back. The bond will set fully. You'll be tied to me, to the curse, to the beast, to everything I am." "Are you absolutely certain?" Sierra turned her face into his palm, feeling the calluses, the warmth, the faint tremor that betrayed his own fear. "I'm certain." "Then God's help us both." He pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt him shaking. "Because I don't know how to be gentle with hope. And you make me hope in ways that terrify me." Outside, storm clouds gathered over the mountains. And in the great hall, Lord Rathgar began planning his next move against a king who had just found the one thing that might save him or damn them both. The examination took place 3 days later in the fortress's ancient ceremonial chamber. Sierra had never seen this room before, few had. It was carved directly into the mountain stone, its walls covered with symbols that predated the curse by centuries. A circular pool of water dominated the center, said to reflect truth when a seer looked into its depths. The pack elders sat in a semicircle, their faces impassive, but their eyes sharp with judgment. Lord Rathgar occupied the seat of honor, his expression barely concealing his anticipation of her failure. And Cale stood to the side, forbidden from speaking or interfering. His hands clenched so tightly she could see white knuckles from across the room. The seer was an ancient female Lycan named Morvana, her silver hair braided with bone beads, and her blind eyes somehow more penetrating than any with sight. "Come, child," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Stand before the pool." Sierra obeyed, her heart thundering. The water was perfectly still, reflecting her face like a mirror and showing nothing else. "Bare your wrist." Sierra extended her right arm. Morvana produced a silver blade, its edge so sharp it caught torchlight like liquid. Without preamble, she drew it across Sierra's skin. Blood welled, dripping into the pool. The water began to glow. The bond manifests in blood first, Morvanna explained, for the benefit of the watching elders. If she is truly the king's mate, her essence will resonate with his, even across distance. The glow intensified, and images began to form in the water. Syrah gasped as she saw them, flashes of memory and emotion that weren't hers. Kale as a child, before the curse. The first transformation, his body tearing itself apart. Years of isolation and pain. The night she'd stood outside his cell. Viewed from his perspective, how he'd seen her as a light in suffocating darkness, and beneath it all, a golden thread connecting her heartbeat to his. The bond is genuine, Morvanna declared. Fate chosen, not politically manipulated. Murmurs rippled through the elders. Hrathgar's expression darkened. Genuine or not, he said, standing. She remains unsuitable. A servant with no lineage, no training in pack law, no strength to survive the demands of queenship. Strength can be tested. Morvanna replied calmly, then test it. The seer turned her blind gaze to Syrah. The maid of a cursed king must endure what others cannot. She must prove she can withstand pain, face fear, and remain unbroken. Are you willing to undergo the traditional trials? Syrah's mouth was dry, but she forced the words out. I am. Then we begin with memory. The water rippled again, but this time when Syrah looked into it, she saw her own past reflected back. The cottage burning, her mother's wasted body, the villagers' suspicious stares. Every moment of rejection and loneliness magnified until it felt like drowning. Face what you've survived, Morvanna said. Name your pain. Syrah's voice shook. Abandonment, always being invisible, unwanted, watching my mother die, knowing the village blamed her for sickness they couldn't understand. And do you blame her? No, the word was fierce. She did nothing wrong. They were just afraid, and fear makes people cruel. The water cleared. Morvanna nodded. Memory acknowledged. Now fear. The pool's surface turned black. From its depths rose an image that made Syrah's blood freeze. Kale in full transformation, the beast lunging toward her with jaws open, claws extended. She knew it wasn't real, knew it was illusion, but her body didn't care. Terror locked her muscles. What do you fear most? Morvanna's voice seemed to come from far away. Losing him, the truth ripped from Syrah's throat. Not to the curse, but to the part of him that believes he's not worth saving. The part that will push me away to protect me. The beast image froze mid-lunge, then dissolved. Morvanna's expression was unreadable. Fear acknowledged. Now, the final test. Bond truth. The seer stepped back, and Kale moved forward compelled by the ritual despite his clear desire to intervene. His eyes met Syrah's, apologetic and anguished. The bond requires full honesty, Morvanna explained. Secrets poison it from within. So I ask you both, what do you truly want from this union? Kale spoke first, his voice rough. I want her safe, happy, free from the burden of my curse, even if that means she chooses to leave. And you? The seer turned to Syrah. She looked at Kale, at this broken king who thought himself unworthy of love, and let the truth pour out. I want to be chosen, not because I'm useful or convenient or politically advantageous, but because I matter. Because someone looked at me and saw worth. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And I want him to believe he's worth choosing too. The pool erupted with light so bright the elders shielded their eyes. When it faded, a mark had appeared on Syrah's wrist, a stylized wolf's head crowned in thorns. Identical to the one that had always marked Kale's shoulder. The mate bond. Fully sealed. Morvanna smiled for the first time. The trials are complete. She has proven herself worthy. But Hrathgar wasn't finished. Worthy by ancient ritual, perhaps. But can she survive the practical reality? He stood, radiating menace. The next full moon is 3 weeks away. I propose a final test. Let her remain with the king during his transformation. If she survives unharmed, I will acknowledge her as legitimate. If not, he shrugged. Then the bond was a mistake, and we returned to discussing proper succession. The room erupted in argument. It was an impossible demand. Even mated pairs didn't share space during full transformation. The risk was too great. Kale's voice cut through the chaos. Absolutely not. I won't. I accept, Syrah said. Every eye turned to her. Kale looked stricken, betrayed. You don't know what you're agreeing to, he said desperately. I know exactly what I'm agreeing to. Syrah met Hrathgar's gaze steadily. 3 weeks. I'll stand with him during the transformation. And when I walk out unharmed, you'll honor your word. Hrathgar's smile was cold. When you walk out, such confidence from a servant girl. From your future queen, Morvanna corrected quietly. The bond has chosen. The trials are past. Politics cannot undo what fate has sealed. The Northern Alpha's expression promised retribution, but he gave a curt nod. 3 weeks then. We'll see if her confidence is warranted, or if it's just the foolishness of youth. As the elders filed out, Kale grabbed Sierra's arm, pulling her into an alcove. Why would you do that? His eyes were wild with fear and anger. You have no idea what you've just committed to. The beast doesn't recognize bonds or oaths. It only knows I know. Sierra placed her hand over his heart, feeling it racing. But I also know that every time I've stood near you during transformation, you've calmed. The bond affects the beast, whether you believe it or not, and if I'm wrong. If the bond isn't enough and he couldn't finish the sentence, then at least I'll have tried. At least I'll have chosen to fight for something instead of just surviving. She stood on tiptoe, bringing her face close to his. I'm not afraid of you, Kale. When are you going to stop being afraid for me? He crushed her against his chest, his embrace desperate. Never. God's help me, never. But as she felt his heartbeat sync with hers, the bond humming between them like a living thing, Sierra allowed herself to hope that fear wouldn't be enough to break what fate had forged. The 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and politics. Sierra moved from the servants' quarters to rooms adjacent to Kale's chambers, a statement that she was now recognized as his mate, even if not yet formally crowned. The transition was jarring. Servants who had ignored her now bowed. Nobles who had never spared her a glance now watched her every move, assessing, judging. Kale taught her what he could: pack politics, the history of the curse, the delicate balance of power that kept the Lycan territories from descending into civil war. But mostly, he taught her himself, the man beneath the crown and the beast. She learned that he loved starlight but hated storms, that he could recite ancient poetry but stumbled over simple compliments, that his hands were gentle when he thought no one was watching, tracing the spines of old books or fixing broken things in the fortress with meticulous care. And she learned that he was desperately, painfully convinced he didn't deserve happiness. Why do you do that? She asked one evening, watching him pace before the fire in his chambers. The full moon was 5 days away, and the tension in him was building like a wound spring. Do what? Pull away every time we get close. Emotionally, I mean. Sierra set down the book she'd been pretending to read. You'll hold me, kiss me, tell me I'm important, and then you'll find some reason to create distance. Kale stopped pacing. His shoulders were rigid. Because getting close means you'll be there when I break. And I don't want you to see that. I've already seen it. I watched you transform, remember? That was different. You were behind bars, safe. He turned, and his eyes were haunted. In 5 days, there will be nothing between us but my rapidly failing control. You'll see exactly what I become and you won't be able to look away. Good. Sierra stood, crossing to him. Because I'm tired of you hiding from me. From yourself. I'm not hiding. I'm protecting. You're terrified that if I see all of you, the rage, the pain, the monster, I'll realize you're not worth saving. She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. But here's the thing, Kale. I already know about the monster. I've seen it, felt it, stood close enough to touch it. And I'm still here. His hands came up to cover hers, trembling. You shouldn't be. But I am. And in 5 days, I'll prove it. The night before the full moon. Kale tried one last time to change her mind. They stood in the containment cell, the massive chamber where he'd spent countless transformations alone. The chains were already prepared, silver glinting in torchlight. The stone walls bore scars from years of violence. It's not too late, he said quietly. You could still leave. Watch from outside the door like before. No one would blame you. Sierra walked to the center of the room, running her fingers along one of the chains. Where will you be during the transformation? Here, chained to the wall to prevent, to minimize damage. Then I'll be here too. She met his gaze steadily. Beside you. Sierra, no more arguments. No more protecting me from your truth. She moved to him, taking his hands. Tomorrow night, we face this together. And when dawn comes, Rathgar and his alphas will have no choice but to acknowledge what we already know. The bond is real, and it's stronger than the curse. Kale pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But fate apparently disagrees. She held him tighter. Besides, I'm not exactly a prize either. Invisible servant girl with no family, remember? You're wrong about that. He pulled back just enough to look at her. You're the strongest person I've ever met. The bravest. And somehow, impossibly, you're mine. And you're mine. Syrah kissed him, soft and certain. Monster, man, and king. All of it. The full moon rose like a curse made visible. Syrah stood in the containment cell, Kale already chained to the wall before her. The pack elders watched from behind protective barriers, Hrothgar prominent among them. The fortress priests chanted their wards. Guards stood ready with silver-tipped spears, and Kale looked at her with eyes that held both love and terror. Last chance, he whispered. Stop talking, she replied, moving to stand directly in front of him. Save your strength. The transformation began with the moon's light touching him through the high window. Syrah watched as his body convulsed, bones cracking and reshaping. His scream of agony nearly broke her resolve, but she forced herself to remain still, to project calm even as her heart shattered. The beast emerged in violent stages, claws extending, fur rippling across skin, face elongating into a muzzle filled with too many teeth. The chains pulled taut as the creature struggled, its eyes burning gold with mindless rage. Then those eyes found her. The beast went still. Its massive chest heaved with labored breaths, but the frantic struggling stopped. It tilted its head, studying her with an expression that was almost confused. Syrah took a step forward. Syrah, don't. One of the guards started to protest, but Morvanna silenced him with a gesture. Let her, the seer said quietly. The bond will hold. Another step. The beast tracked her movement, but didn't lunge. Instead, it whined that same heartbreaking sound from before. I know, Syrah whispered, close enough now to feel its breath. I know it hurts, but I'm here. You're not alone. The beast's ears flattened. It strained against the chains, but not in attack, in an effort to get closer. To touch her, Syrah reached out and placed her hand on its massive head. The elders gasped. Hrothgar half rose from his seat, but Syrah didn't flinch as she felt coarse fur beneath her palm, the heat of the cursed transformation, the barely contained power of a creature that could tear her apart with a single swipe. The beast's eyes closed. Its breathing slowed, and impossibly, it leaned into her touch. That's it, Syrah murmured, stroking behind one pointed ear. I've got you. We're going to get through this together. For the rest of the night, she stayed there. When the beast grew agitated, she spoke to it in low, soothing tones. When the chains burned into its flesh, she pressed close as she dared and let her presence serve as anchor. The transformation back was gentler this time. Syrah watched as the massive form gradually shrank, as fur receded and bones realigned. When it was done, Kale lay curled on the stone floor, his breathing ragged, but even. He looked up at her with wonder. You stayed. Of course I stayed. The beast. It didn't hurt you. No, it recognized me, just like you do. Syrah knelt beside him, her hand finding his. The bond held, Kale, just like I knew it would. From behind the barriers, Morvanna spoke. The trial is complete. She has proven the bond's strength beyond any doubt. Hrothgar stood, his expression tight with frustration. Very well. The bond is acknowledged. But that doesn't resolve the succession issue or the curse itself. Actually, Morvanna interrupted. It might. All eyes turned to the seer. She moved to the pool of water that had been brought into the chamber, her blind gaze seeing things others couldn't. The curse has been weakening, she said slowly. Each transformation with her present has been less violent, more controlled. The bond acts as a tether, giving the beast what it never had before: connection, purpose, a reason to fight for humanity rather than surrender to rage. Are you suggesting the mate bond could break the curse? Kale's voice was hoarse with disbelief. Not break, but manage. Transform it from a liability into something closer to balance. Morvanna smiled. The original curse sought to punish your bloodline by making you monsters, but mate bonds were never accounted for in the witch's vengeance. Love, apparently, is more powerful than hatred. Syrah helped Kale stand, her arm around his waist to steady him. So what does this mean? It means, Morvanna said, that a king with a true mate bond might finally be strong enough to unite the packs, to end the cycles of challenge and political maneuvering, to rule, not despite the curse, but with an understanding of how to master it. Hrothgar's jaw clenched. You expect us to follow a servant girl as queen? I expect you to follow the mate fate chose for your king, Morvanna corrected. Unless you'd prefer to continue this dance of failed challenges and unstable leadership. The Northern Alpha stared at Syrah for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he inclined his head in grudging acknowledgement. The bond is recognized. Let them prove themselves in rule as they have in survival. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it was enough. As the elders filed out and the guards began removing the chains, Kale pulled Sierra into his arms. I thought I'd lost you a dozen times tonight, he murmured against her hair. You're not getting rid of me that easily. She pulled back to look at him. We're in this together now. Moon, cycles, politics, curse, management, all of it, together, he repeated, as if testing the word. Then he smiled, a real smile, full of hope she'd never seen in him before. I could get used to that. Good, because you don't have a choice. Sierra kissed him, soft and certain. I chose you, Kale. Monster, man, and king. And I'm going to keep choosing you, every single day, until you finally believe you're worth it. His arms tightened around her. I'm starting to. Outside, dawn broke over the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The fortress, which had felt like a prison for so long, suddenly felt like something else, like home. And as Kale and Sierra stood together in the aftermath of the longest night, both of them marked by the mate bond that had transformed everything, they understood that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more transformations, more battles, both political and personal. But they would face them together. The invisible servant girl had become a queen. The cursed king had found his salvation. And the beast, that furious, anguished creature, had finally found peace in the arms of someone who saw him as more than a monster. The bond had chosen, and fate, for once, had chosen wisely. The end.